A thousand hungry beasts against an old man. Borja's cry tore through the icy air, echoing across the frozen steppes of Yakutia at 71 degrees 6. His eyes, hardened by decades of brutal winters, saw hell materialize. A tide of dark shapes and gleaming green eyes, the 1,000 leopards, advancing relentlessly on his people's herd of sacred horses. The ground trembled under the predator's weight. The desperate whinnies of the horses mingled with guttural growls, and Borja knew this was not just an attack, but a death sentence for his village. With his heart beating to the rhythm of survival itself, he raised his weapon. But what could he do against such an army? And what he was about to discover about himself would change everything. Borja, with the heavy weapon in his gloved hands, felt the cold not just on his skin, but in his bones, a familiar ache that intensified with the tension. It wasn't the fear of death that paralyzed him, but the dread of starvation that would befall his village if the horses were lost. He looked at the herd, the animals trembling, some already wounded, terrified. They were the soul of his people, the promise of warmth, food, and transport across the white expanse. His gaze fixed on the eyes of a foal, young and frightened, seeking refuge behind its mother. In that gaze, Borja saw the innocence of his grandchildren, the future he had sworn to protect. The image of Anya, his eldest granddaughter, with her wide smile and dark hair flying in the wind, flooded his mind, renewing his determination. Ancestral cunning, forged in decades of hunting and survival, began to bubble in his mind. A solitary hunter, with creaking joints at every movement, against 1,000 predators? Logic screamed that it was impossible. But logic had never accounted for the resilience of the Yakut spirit, nor the strength of love for his family and his people. His chapped lips moved, forming words that the icy wind almost carried away. "I will not allow it." He couldn't face the horde head-on, not with his waning energy and age weighing heavily on him. He needed to be smarter, use the landscape itself as an ally, transform the merciless expanse into a trap for the hungry. Far away in the village, Borja's granddaughter Anya, only 15 winters old, felt a pang of apprehension that prevented her from concentrating on her tasks. She watched the smoke from the chimneys, the comforting warmth of the furs in her tent, but her heart was with her grandfather. Borja was the rock of the family, the pillar of wisdom and courage, the man who had taught her to read the stars and respect the spirit of the land. She remembered his stories, how he always found a way, even when snow covered all trails. Her mother, Lena, wove a reindeer wool blanket, her fingers agile, but her distant gaze, lost in the white landscape beyond the tent's opening, betrayed her worry. "He'll make it," Lena murmured, more to herself than to Anya, trying to ward off the shadow of doubt that hung over everyone. The entire village depended on that herd, and Borja was their only hope. Back on the frozen battlefield, Borja lowered his weapon, a gesture that seemed like surrender, but was strategy. His eyes scanned the landscape, searching for weak points, natural bottlenecks, depressions in the snow. He noticed a narrow rocky gorge to the east, covered by a treacherous layer of ice and soft snow, a perfect place to disorganize a mass charge. The leopards, driven by ancestral hunger, advanced en masse, their hunting discipline dissolving into voracity. This was his chance. He needed to lure them there, divide them, turning their numerical strength into a disadvantage. With a sigh that turned to vapor in the air, Borja began to move, not towards the predators, but in a calculated arc, drawing the attention of some of the nearest horses with a low whistle and a subtle movement of his staff, guiding them away from the main charge, towards the gorge. Each step was an agony for his tired legs, but the image of the frightened foal and Anya's future propelled him. He was not just a hunter, he was a guardian, and the wisdom of his ancestors ran in his veins, whispering secrets about the ice, the wind, and the minds of predators. The fight would not be one of brute force, but of intelligence and heart. A chess game where the lives of his people were the highest stake. Borja, with every fiber of his being screaming in protest, continued to guide the small group of horses eastward. His knees ached, his back stooped under the weight of decades of winters and the urgency of the moment. The low whistle, almost inaudible in the howl of the wind, was an ancestral call, a bond between the man and the animals he protected. The horses, though frightened, seemed to recognize their guardian's voice, moving reluctantly, but following the staff Borja used to indicate the way. With each step in the deep snow, the old hunter's body seemed to sink a little deeper, but the image of Anya's smile was a fire that burned in his chest, warming him against the relentless cold. He could not fail, ever. The leopard horde, initially a chaotic sea of fury, began to show the first cracks in its unity. Hunger was a powerful driver, but Borja's intelligence was beginning to sow confusion. Some of the predators, the youngest and most impulsive, were drawn by the movement of the horses Borja was guiding, diverting from the main charge. Their hungry eyes fixed on the nearest prey, and they followed the fresh trail, unaware they were being led into treacherous terrain. Others, older and more cautious, hesitated, sniffing the air and sensing the change in the attack's dynamic. The mass of 1,000 beasts began to stretch, to fragment, exactly as Borja had predicted. The rocky gorge, with its steep slopes and soft snow hiding slippery ice, awaited them. It was a natural trap, and Borja, with his wisdom, was merely masterfully refining it. Meanwhile, in the village, Anya's apprehension turned into palpable restlessness. She couldn't sit still. Her fingers drummed on the wooden table, and her eyes fixed on the tent's opening seemed to try to pierce the blizzard and reach her grandfather. Lena, noticing her daughter's agitation, gently touched her shoulder. "He knows what he's doing, my daughter. Borja always has." But Lena's voice, though firm, couldn't hide the tension in her own shoulders, the way she clutched the reindeer wool fabric. Anya, however, remembered an old lesson from her grandfather. "When fear paralyzes you, Anya, look for what you can do, not what you cannot." She stood up, determination shining in her dark eyes. "I'll check the alarm traps he taught us to set on the village outskirts. Maybe we can help direct any that escape." Lena nodded, a thread of hope igniting in her maternal gaze. Borja, feeling the burning in his lungs and the ice burning his nostrils, finally reached the entrance to the gorge. He had succeeded. A significant portion of the leopard horde, perhaps 200 or 300, had been diverted and was now squeezing into the rocky bottleneck. The uneven terrain and the ice hidden under the soft snow were already causing stumbles and confusion among the predators. They slipped, collided with each other, their speed drastically decreasing. Borja, with a bitter smile on his chapped lips, knew it was just the beginning. He couldn't stop them there, but he could delay them, disorganize them, completely exhaust them. With a final effort, he pushed the horses into a small, sheltered recess in the rocks where they would be temporarily safer. His eyes swept the landscape again, looking for the next strategic point. The other part of the horde, the majority, was still advancing towards the main herd, but now with less cohesion. Borja felt a pang of exhaustion so deep it seemed to suck the very life from his bones. But the Yakut spirit, forged in 1,000 winters, refused to yield. He raised his staff, a symbol of his unbreakable will, and began to move again, charting a new path, a new strategy, while the icy wind whispered ancestral secrets in his ears. The battle against hunger and nature was far from over, but Borja had won the first round. Hope, fragile as a snowflake, still hung in the icy air of Yakutia, persistent and vital. Borja, with gasping breath that formed small clouds in the frozen air, felt the weight of the decision on his stooped shoulders. He had achieved the first part. The horde was divided, But exhaustion was an enemy as relentless as the cold, and his joints seemed to scream with every movement. He leaned against the icy rock of the recess, closing his eyes for a brief instant, the image of Anya's worried face surfacing in his mind. It was not time to falter. He needed more time, more cunning. His mind, despite his tired body, worked feverishly, searching ancestral memory for the lessons of his father and grandfather, who taught that snow, ice, wind, everything could be a weapon or a trap. Meanwhile, Anya, with her heart pounding in her chest, moved with agility along the village outskirts. Her reindeer hide moccasins barely made a sound in the soft snow. She remembered her grandfather teaching her to tie alarm threads, made of dried sinews, to small metal bells, almost inaudible to the human ear, but which would vibrate with the passage of any large animal. Her fingers, accustomed to delicacy and strength, worked with precision, checking each knot and bell. She couldn't fight like Borja, but she could be his eyes and ears, a silent sentinel. The biting wind whipped her face, but she didn't feel the cold, only the urgency. A small flame of pride ignited. She was helping to protect her people. Back at the gorge, Borja opened his eyes, his determination renewed. He noticed the large, loose stones on the steep slope, above the leopards struggling on the ice. With monumental effort, he began to climb, every muscle protesting, every breath a burden. His plan was simple, yet dangerous. To dislodge the stones, not to injure, but to create a larger obstacle, a deafening noise that would frighten them and push them back, away from the horses. He grabbed a stone the size of his head, feeling its icy roughness. With a muffled groan, he pushed it, watching it roll and bounce down the slope, hitting the ice with a thud. The leopards, already disoriented, retreated in panic, slipping and falling. In the village, Lena, alongside other women, prepared more firewood, the fire crackling in the center of the tent. Her eyes, however, were constantly on the opening, waiting for a sign, for news. She knew Borja was doing the impossible, facing 1,000 beasts alone, and this unwavering faith was what sustained her. With each crackle of the firewood, she thought of the sound of Borja's staff, the sound of his calm and wise voice, which always brought comfort and direction. The entire village was a nest of apprehension. A heavy silence hung in the air, but there was also a stubborn hope, a flame that refused to die, fueled by the resilience of a man who was more than a hunter. He was the guardian of his people. Borja, exhausted but with a gleam of triumph in his eyes, watched the leopards retreat. He had gained precious time. The noise of the stones and the confusion had temporarily driven them away. But hunger was a persistent enemy, and he knew they would return. He now needed to focus on the main horde, which was still advancing towards the larger herd. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, he descended the slope, his legs trembling. The next step would be the riskiest, the most audacious. He needed fire, smoke, an illusion of even greater danger to scare away the rest of the 1,000. His eyes swept the landscape, searching for dry bushes and the frozen tundra that could be his allies. The battle was far from over, but Borja, the old YAKUT hunter, was just beginning to show the true and unwavering strength of his indomitable spirit. Borja, with blurred vision and aching muscles, scoured the frozen tundra. Every movement was a battle against the exhaustion that dragged him to the ground. He needed fuel, something that would burn and create a smokescreen to scare the predators without harming them. His experienced eyes soon found dry bushes hardened by the cold and tufts of dried moss. With gloved, aching fingers, he collected the material, carefully piling it up. The image of the leopard's hungry eyes, still advancing on the main herd, was a whip in his mind. He knew that fire, even a small one in the white desert, would be a strange and terrifying element for the beasts. Far away, Anya felt the wind whisper as she checked the alarm bells. One of them, tied to a dry branch, was slightly displaced. Her eyes scanned the snow, and she noticed a fresh paw print, larger than a fox's, smaller than a wolf's. A shiver ran through her. A leopard had passed, perhaps one of those that had separated. She pressed her lips together, determination hardening her young face. Carefully, she readjusted the bell, ensuring that any future movement would be detected. It wasn't the roar of the beast that frightened her, but the idea of her grandfather alone, facing dangers. She remembered Borja. Anya, vigilance is the first line of defense, and she would be vigilant, for him and for everyone in the village. In the main tent, Lena tried to remain calm, but the tension was palpable. The women wove in silence, the men sharpened tools, but all eyes turned to the white expanse outside. A young mother, with her baby nestled in her arms, asked with a trembling voice, "Will he make it, Lena?" Lena stopped weaving, her eyes meeting the young woman's. A faint smile appeared. "Borja is like the mountains, my daughter. He may seem old, but his strength comes from deep roots. He will find a way." Her words were for the young woman and for herself, a promise she needed to believe. Hope was a fragile but essential thread that kept them united in that moment of uncertainty. Borja, with flammable material, took flint and steel from his fur pouch. His hands, though calloused, trembled with effort and cold. He knelt, shielding the small pile of dry bushes from the biting wind. The first spark, weak and hesitant, didn't catch. The second, the third. Frustration threatened to overwhelm him, but he took a deep breath, remembering the patience of the hunt. On the fourth attempt, a small bluish flame danced, licking the dry moss. Carefully, Borja blew, feeding the fire with his own breath, watching it grow slowly, releasing dense, dark smoke into the icy air. It was not a fire to harm, but a smoke screen, a sign of danger and mystery. The smoke, carried by the wind, spread towards the main leopard horde. The animals, on alert, sniffed the strange scent and saw the dark column on the white horizon. The instinct of self-preservation, stronger than hunger, prevailed. They hesitated, growling, confused. The fire, small, was something their primitive minds could not process. Nearby predators retreated from the irritating smoke. Borja watched, his heart beating with triumph and exhaustion. His eyes burned, his lungs ached, but he had succeeded. The horde was disorganizing, and the hope of his people, though faint, shone brighter. The fight continued, but Borja had planted the seed of doubt in the predators, crucial to saving the horses and the soul of the village. Borja, with a dry throat and rough tongue, felt the metallic taste of exhaustion in his mouth. The smoke had worked, but he knew it was a temporary solution. The leopards, though momentarily disoriented, were driven by an atrocious hunger that would soon overcome their fear of the unknown. He needed something more, something that would make them believe the price of the hunt was too high. His eyes, which had seen countless winters and countless challenges, fixed on a peculiar rock formation, a natural labyrinth of rocks and crevices west of the main herd. If he could lead them there, the geography itself would become a trap, further fragmenting the horde. As Borja plotted his next move in the village, Anya felt a subtle tug on the alarm thread she had readjusted. A distant bell tinkled, almost muffled by the wind, but unmistakable to her attentive ears. Her heart pounded. A leopard. Not the entire horde, but a scout, perhaps, or an animal that had separated from the main group. She crouched in the snow, her eyes scanning the faint darkness of the twilight that was beginning to fall. Her grandfather had taught her to read the signs of nature, to sense presence, even when nothing was visible. She felt no fear, only a growing responsibility. Her fingers tightened around the handle of a small hunting knife, a gift from Borja, and she moved silently, following the sound. In the main tent, Lena, sitting by the fire, felt a shiver run down her spine despite the warmth. She looked at the other women, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. each of them weaving or mending furs, but with their eyes always turned towards the entrance. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the firewood and the distant howl of the wind. Lena took the hand of her neighbor, a younger woman named Nara, who held her small child. "Have faith, Nara," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "Borja is the spirit of Yakutia. He carries the strength of our ancestors. He will bring us victory." Her words were a balm, not only for Nara, but for all who heard them, a reminder that hope was the most powerful weapon. Borja, with energy that seemed to come from a hidden source, began to move towards the rocky labyrinth. He knew that time was his cruelest enemy. The main leopard horde, though still disorganized by the smoke, was regrouping, its hunger redoubled. He needed to be fast, cunning. With guttural cries and sweeping movements of his staff, he began to attract the attention of the nearest predators, leading them into the crevices and narrow passages of the rocks. It was not an escape, but an inverted herding tactic, using his own presence as bait. Anya, following the trail of the bell, found the leopard. It was a young animal, thin and with eyes gleaming with hunger. It was sniffing one of the horses Borja had previously moved away. Anya knew she couldn't confront it directly. Instead, she remembered another lesson from her grandfather. "Sound is a powerful weapon, Anya. Use it wisely." She picked up a dry branch and struck it against an exposed rock, creating a sharp, unexpected sound. The leopard startled, its ears swiveling. Anya repeated the sound louder, and the animal, confused and frightened, retreated, disappearing into the darkness. A small triumph, but significant. Borja watched with bitter satisfaction as the leopards, attracted by his presence and the promise of easy prey, squeezed into the rocky labyrinth. The rocks and crevices, designed by nature, now worked in his favor, breaking the predators' formation, forcing them to separate, to fight for space. He had not harmed them, but he had disoriented and exhausted them. The battle was a dance of intelligence and patience, and Borja, the old Yakut hunter, was leading it with the wisdom of 1,000 winters. The extreme cold, age, exhaustion, none of it mattered. Only the hope of his people, the promise of a future for Anya and for the horses. He had turned the tide, one step at a time. Borja, gasping, watched the confusion of the leopards in the rocky labyrinth. The plan worked. The horde fragmented, squeezed between crevices, stumbling over rocks and growling. The muffled sound echoed in disarray. He felt relief, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. His knees ached. His spine protested. He needed to maintain the pressure without giving them time to regroup. As Borja guided the predators deeper, striking his staff, a peripheral movement caught his attention. Far away, to his right, a group of perhaps 50 leopards, the most cunning, was bypassing the rocks. They moved swiftly towards the main herd of horses, now more exposed. Borja's heart leaped. It was a blind spot, a flaw that relentless hunger had exploited. He had underestimated their ability to adapt. In the village, Anya, on patrol, felt the wind change, bringing a strange and intense scent. She stopped, body tense, eyes narrowed. Her grandfather had taught her to read the wind. Something was different. She turned towards the scent, an area near the herd. Urgency tightened her chest. Lena in the tent felt a shiver. The fire's flame flickered, casting shadows. She looked at the women, faces etched with expectation. "The wind is changing," she murmured. Ancestral wisdom connected them to the land. She stood up, eyes fixed on the opening, a dark premonition. Borja, with a hoarse cry, realized he needed to act immediately. Leaving the labyrinth meant losing control, but not acting meant the annihilation of the herd. It was an impossible choice. The life of his people and Anya's future depended on his decision. With a last look at the trapped leopards, he turned, feeling pain, anger, and helplessness. He had to run, intercept that cunning group, whatever the cost. Anya, by instinct, began to run, not towards the village, but towards the area of the intense scent. She knew it was dangerous, moving away from safety, but her grandfather and the horses propelled her. Small, but with vast courage. She had no plan, only the certainty that she needed to help. Every step in the snow was an effort, adrenaline in her veins. Borja, stumbling, ran in the opposite direction, towards the group of leopards. His lungs burned. Exhaustion threatened to bring him down. He didn't know how to stop them, but he had to try. Ancestral wisdom whispered, "Create a new path. Use cunning." He looked at the horizon, searching for details for a new weapon. The battle had taken an unexpected turn, and Borja, the old YAKUT hunter, was on the brink of an abyss, but his indomitable spirit refused to yield, the hope of his people weighing on every beat of his heart. Borja, with every fiber of his being protesting, felt the icy air tear at his lungs. The pain in his knees was a constant torture, but the image of the 50 cunning leopards, moving like shadows towards the main herd, was a fire that propelled him. He could not fail, not now when hope seemed so fragile. His eyes, which had seen Yakutia in all its furies and beauties, swept the desolate landscape. He needed an idea, a trick, something that nature could offer. The tundra, seemingly empty, held secrets for those who knew how to look. Anya, in turn, ran with surprising agility for her age, driven by an instinct that transcended fear. The intense scent, now stronger, guided her. It was a wild, predatory aroma that promised danger, but she did not hesitate. Her small moccasins kicked up clouds of snow with every hurried step. Her grandfather had always said that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. And she acted. The icy wind whipped her face, but she barely felt it, focused only on the silent mission to protect. Her young, yet determined eyes searched for any sign, any trace in the snow that might reveal the enemy's presence. Borja, stumbling, spotted a series of small ice hills formed by wind and snow that stretched like a spine across the landscape. They were fragile, but tall enough to hide. A plan began to form in his tired mind. If he could lure the leopards between these hills, he could use sound and echo to create an illusion of greater danger, a sound trap. He took a deep breath, the icy air burning his throat, and changed his route, running in an arc to intercept the group of predators before they reached the horses. In the village, Lena felt a tightness in her chest that would not leave her. The wind, which had howled before, now seemed to whisper omens. She approached the tent's opening, watching the darkness that swallowed the white expanse. One of the women, young Nara, with her baby still asleep in her arms, asked with a choked voice, "Lena, do you think Borja is safe? And Anya?" She went out to help. Lena turned, her eyes meeting Nara's. She held the young woman's hand firmly, feeling her trembling. "Nara, Yakutia teaches us to be strong. Borja and Anya carry that strength. They are together in spirit, even separated by the snow. We must have faith." Her words were a balm, but also a silent prayer, a plea to the ancestral spirits to protect her family. Borja finally managed to position himself between the ice hills and the group of leopards. He was exhausted, but adrenaline pumped through his veins. With a hoarse cry, he struck his staff hard against one of the ice hills. The sound, amplified by the echo of the formations, reverberated like thunder, startling the leopards. They stopped, confused, their ears swiveling, looking from side to side, unable to identify the exact source of the noise. Borja repeated the blow, and the sound spread, creating the impression that many others were approaching. The leopards, already cautious, began to hesitate, some turning, seeking an escape route. Anya, meanwhile, had reached a small rise. Below, in the gloom, she saw what the scent indicated. A group of 5 leopards separated from the scout she had driven away, sniffing the air, clearly hunting. They were dangerously close to a small group of horses Borja had left in a recess earlier. Her heart tightened. She couldn't risk a confrontation. She remembered her grandfather. Anya, nature has its own tricks. Observe and learn. Her eyes swept the landscape. She saw a small crevice in the rock and inside it dry, frozen branches. A plan, simple yet audacious, formed in her mind. She had to act, and fast. Borja watched the 50 leopards retreat, disoriented by the sound. He had gained time, but he knew it was fragile. Hunger was a powerful driver. He needed more. His narrowed eyes searched for the next step, the next cunning move. The battle was an incessant dance, and he, the old Yakut hunter, was determined to dance until the end, protecting the lives of his people and Anya's hope, which now seemed so close yet so distant, fighting her own silent battle in the vast and merciless Yakutia. Borja, with numb arms and a throbbing head, felt the cold penetrate to his bones. The 50 leopards had retreated, but the pause was tenuous, a momentary truce in the battle. He needed more than the echo of his staff. His eyes, witnesses to decades of relentless winters, fixed on the ice hills. Fragile yet treacherous, they could be used as a silent weapon. An idea, born of urgency and ancestral wisdom, took shape. To use the instability of the ice against them. Not to injure, but to create a barrier of discomfort and uncertainty that would undermine their confidence. With a muffled groan, Borja began to strike the base of one of the taller hills, not to bring it down, but to weaken it. Small blocks of ice broke off, rolling with a dry, booming sound down the slope, disorienting the predators trying to regroup. Anya, with her heart beating like a shaman's drum in her chest, crouched near the rocky crevice. The 5 leopards were a few meters from the horses, nostrils sniffing the icy air, bodies tense, ready to attack. She had to be quick, every second was precious. With agile fingers, she gathered dry, frozen branches, carefully piling them at the entrance of the crevice. From her small fur pouch, she took out flint and steel, gifts from Borja for emergencies. Holding her breath, she began to strike the stones. Faint sparks appeared, but the first attempts failed, her fingertips already numb. Frustration threatened, but the image of the horses, her people's sustenance, gave her new strength. On the 3rd attempt, a small bluish flame danced, licking the branches. She blew gently, the fire growing, releasing thin smoke and a smell of burning wood that quickly spread through the air. In the main tent, Lena, sitting by the fire, smelled smoke, distinct from common firewood. Her eyes widened. It was smoke from bushes, from something burning outdoors. A shiver ran through her body. It wasn't Borja, he was far away. Could it be Anya? Worry tightened her chest, but a thread of pride emerged. Her granddaughter was acting with courage. Lena stood up, walking to the tent's opening, her gaze fixed in the direction of the smell. The other women, noticing her agitation, fell silent, their eyes following hers, shared anxiety hanging in the air. Nara, with the baby in her arms, hugged him tighter, seeking solace in Lena's firm gaze. Anya's leopards, caught by surprise by the dense smell and rising smoke, retreated in disarray. The fire, even small and contained in the crevice, was a strange and frightening element for their wild minds. They growled, confused and hesitant, their hunting instincts momentarily overcome by the fear of the unknown and the unexpected heat. Anya watched, her heart still pounding in her chest, but with a gleam of triumph and relief in her young eyes. She had succeeded. The small group of horses was safe for now, grazing peacefully a few meters away. She kept the fire burning, feeding it with more dry branches, creating a smoke barrier that the predators dared not cross, an invisible line of protection forged by her courage. Borja, in turn, continued to strike the ice with a force that seemed to come from his last reserves. The blocks rolled, creating a dry noise and a small cloud of snow. The 50 leopards, attempting to regroup, were again disoriented by the incessant disturbance. They didn't understand what was happening, but the unstable terrain and the noise kept them at bay. Borja, exhausted but with a clear mind, knew that the battle was about patience and the cunning use of every element of nature. He had turned the ice into an unexpected ally. Anya's smoke, now visible in the distance, was a sign that his family was also fighting, a powerful reminder that he was not alone. Hope, fragile as a flame in the icy wind, was what kept him standing. Borja, with vision blurred by effort and exhaustion, watched Anya's smoke. It was a beacon of courage in the white immensity, a silent cry that he was not alone. That small point of smoke rekindled an ember in his almost extinguished spirit. He could not yield, not when his granddaughter, so young and fearless, was fighting her own battle. With a renewed breath, he continued to strike the base of the ice hills. Each blow was an act of defiance, a silent prayer. The blocks of ice rolled, and the dry noise, amplified by the echo, kept the 50 leopards in a state of nervousness and confusion. They growled, but did not advance, the instability of the terrain and the unpredictable sound being more effective barriers than any physical trap. Borja knew that this tactic was a respite, a breathing space, but not a definitive solution. Their hunger was a relentless enemy, and the cunning of the predators would soon find an opening. Anya, feeling the warmth of the small fire she had lit, watched the 5 leopards retreat. They kept a safe distance, their eyes gleaming in the gloom, but not daring to approach. The smell of smoke and the heat were too strange for them, a mystery to be avoided. She felt a small pride in her initiative, but worry for her grandfather was a tight knot in her stomach. Where was he? And the main horde? She knew she couldn't stay there forever. The fire would consume the branches quickly. Her young yet keen eyes swept the desolate landscape. She needed a plan to drive the leopards away permanently, or to join Borja. The idea of leaving him alone, facing so many dangers, was unbearable. She clutched the hunting knife in her hand, seeking comfort in the solidity of the metal. In the main tent, Lena approached Nara, who still hugged her baby, seeking warmth and security. "Look, Nara," Lena said, pointing to Anya's distant smoke. "Our little warrior is lighting her own light in the darkness, and Borja, he's out there, fighting like a bear, with the strength of all of us, with the wisdom of our ancestors." Her eyes filled with unshed tears, but her face was one of pure determination, a mirror of her people's resilience. The other women, seeing the smoke and hearing Lena's words, felt a wave of renewed hope, a warmth that combated the external cold. They were not helpless. Their loved ones were fighting, and they, in the village, would keep the spirit alive. They began to sing an ancient song, a soft and melancholic melody that spoke of harsh winters and the unwavering resilience of the YAKUT people, a song that was a balm for their troubled souls. Borja, hearing the distant echo of the song, a sound almost inaudible carried by the wind, felt a strange and deep connection to the village. That song was proof that hope did not die, that life persisted. He knew that time was running out. The 50 leopards, though retreated, began to move in a semicircle, seeking a new approach, their hunting instincts driving them. He needed a greater distraction, something that would make them abandon the pursuit entirely. His eyes fixed on a small frozen lake, not far away, covered by a thin layer of snow. The idea was risky, even dangerous, but it might be the only chance. He needed to lure them onto the thin ice, not so they would fall and get hurt, but so that the sound of the cracking would terrify them and make them retreat. Anya, realizing that the fire was diminishing and its effectiveness waning, made an audacious decision. She couldn't stand still. With a last look at the horses, which seemed calmer and safer for now, she began to move, not directly towards her grandfather, but in an arc, hoping to find a way to flank the leopards Borja was facing. She knew it was dangerous, moving away from the relative safety of her position, but the idea of joining forces with him, of being his rear guard, was stronger than any fear. Her small moccasins slid silently through the snow, and she became an agile shadow, a part of the icy landscape, moved by deep love and unwavering courage. The icy wind seemed to whisper Borja's name, and she responded with the unbreakable determination of her heart. Borja, with a hoarse cry that tore through the icy air, began to move away from the ice hills, running towards the frozen lake. He knew he was exposing himself, becoming the main bait, the focal point of the hungry fury. The 50 leopards, seeing his movement, regrouped with surprising speed and began to pursue him, their growls echoing in the icy vastness. He felt adrenaline pump through his veins, fear and hope mingled in a dangerous and desperate dance. Each step was a silent prayer, each breath a plea to the spirits of Yakutia. He needed to be faster, smarter. The frozen lake was his next and perhaps last hope, a final trump card. He could not fail. The life of his people and Anya's future depended on his cunning and his courage, forged in 1,000 winters and in countless battles against relentless nature. Borja, with gasping breath and his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the icy ground tremble beneath his feet. The 50 leopards, a blur of fur and hungry muscle, were right behind him, their low, menacing growls echoing in the desolate vastness. He didn't look back. His eyes were fixed on the frozen lake ahead, a pale and treacherous surface covered by a thin layer of snow. Each step was an agony, his knees protesting, but the image of Anya, of Lena, of the horses was a shield against the pain, a force that propelled him. He knew he was offering himself as bait, a calculated sacrifice. The hope of his people weighed more than any fear. With a final effort, Borja stepped onto the lake's surface. A dry, frightening crack resonated in the icy air, making his body stiffen. The ice was thinner than he expected, small cracks spreading like spiderwebs beneath his moccasins. He advanced cautiously, gently tapping his staff to test the resistance, creating small noises that added to the sound of the cracking. The leopards, accustomed to solid ground, hesitated at the edge of the lake. The hunting instinct drove them, but the sound of the breaking ice was a primordial warning, a melody of danger they did not understand but respected. Anya, moving like a silent shadow among the rocks and frozen bushes, watched the scene from a distant rise. Her heart tightened as she saw her grandfather on the ice, the leopards lurking on the bank. She understood his plan, its audacity and danger. Her feet were numb with cold, but she couldn't stop. She needed to find the perfect position, a point where she could intervene without exposing herself. Borja's courage was a beacon, and she, his small shadow, was determined to follow his light, to protect his rear. In the village, the women's song continued, a whisper of resilience that floated in the air. Lena, with her wrinkled hands clasped in silent prayer, felt each note, each ancient word, as a link to those who were out there. Nara, with the baby nestled close, looked at Lena, seeking strength in her eyes. Anya's smoke, though diminishing, was still visible, a reminder that the struggle was shared. Uncertainty was a burden, but faith in Borja's wisdom and courage, and now in Anya's cunning, was a warmth that kept them united. Borja, feeling the ice yield slightly under his weight, struck his staff harder. The sound of the cracking intensified, a sharp wail that echoed across the vastness. The leopards retreated even further, confused and frightened. Some of the more audacious, driven by hunger, tried to advance, but the ice cracked beneath their paws, making them leap back with a growl of fear. He didn't want them to fall, only to feel the terror of instability, the threat of ground that was not ground. He was creating an invisible barrier, a psychological trap forged by sound and uncertainty. Anya, seeing the predator's hesitation, realized her chance. She moved to a lower position, where she could have a clear view of the leopards trying to flank her grandfather. They were regrouping, seeking an alternative route, but the fear of the ice kept them in check. She clutched her hunting knife, her eyes fixed on the animal's movements. Her grandfather had taught that nature was an open book, and she was reading every page, every sign, ready to write her own line of defense, to be the silent force Borja needed, the hope he carried in his tired heart. The battle was not against the leopard's hunger, but against the despair that cold and solitude could bring. Borja, exhausted but with an unwavering spirit, knew that every second was a victory, every step back from the predators, a breathing space for his people. Yakutia, with its cruel beauty and merciless vastness, was the stage for an ancestral struggle, where human resilience and family connection were the most powerful weapons. He felt proud of Anya, for her courage, for her presence. Together, they were stronger, an unbreakable bond against adversity. Borja, with a guttural cry that seemed to tear his soul and the last spark of energy from his tired body, struck his staff with all his remaining strength at the thinnest point of the ice. It was not a blow of anger, but of desperation and accumulated wisdom. A deafening roar tore through the icy air, and a vast crack opened beneath his feet, not enough to swallow them into the frozen darkness, but to create an auditory and visual abyss of imminent danger. Small pieces of ice flew like shrapnel, and the lake's surface trembled violently, as if the earth itself were groaning. The 50 leopards on the bank, already terrified by the instability and incessant noise, were seized by a primordial panic that overcame their ancestral hunger. Their growls turned into sharp howls of fear, and they retreated in disarray, some slipping and falling over themselves in the headlong rush to escape the invisible and deafening threat emanating from that old hunter. Borja, stumbling, felt the ice vibrate beneath his feet, but he stood firm, a beacon of defiance and resilience against the relentless fury of nature. Anya, from her elevated position, witnessed the chaos spreading below. It was the crucial moment, the window of opportunity her grandfather had created. With her hunting knife firmly gripped, she began to rapidly strike a formation of accumulated ice and snow on top of a small rocky slope. It was not a devastating avalanche, but a controlled cascade of snow and ice that descended with a hissing sound and a dry impact right behind the fleeing group of leopards. The snow and ice fell, cutting off their regrouping route and pushing them even further away from the lake and the precious horses. The swift and unexpected movement added a layer of terror to their already desperate retreat. The animals, now surrounded by dangers on all sides, treacherous ice ahead and falling snow behind, no longer saw succulent prey, but their own survival. They turned and ran, not towards the village or the horses, but towards the vast and safe mountains from which they came, carrying with them the fear of the old hunter and his granddaughter, an unforgettable lesson in the power of human cunning. Borja watched their hasty retreat, a sigh of relief tearing through his exhausted chest. The 50 leopards, the main group that threatened to decimate the horses, were dispersed, fleeing into the depths of the tundra. He knelt on the ice, his wrinkled hands trembling, but a faint, victorious smile formed on his lips, chapped by the cold. He had succeeded. Ancestral wisdom, courage forged in decades of struggle, and the cunning of his mind had prevailed over hunger and brute force. Anya's smoke, now closer, was a silent and powerful testament to her bravery and their unbreakable connection. He felt old, older than ever, every bone protesting, but his heart was filled with a joy and gratitude that transcended any physical pain. In the village, the women's song ceased abruptly, as if an invisible conductor had given the signal. Lena, with her eyes fixed on the white vastness, felt a profound change in the air, a strange and welcome calm that replaced the suffocating tension. The wind, once a herald of danger and dark omens, now seemed to bring a whisper of peace and hope. She saw Anya's smoke diminish, and the distant sound, which had once been of struggle and despair, was now just the majestic silence of the tundra. A slow, radiant smile spread across her wrinkled face. illuminating her eyes. "They made it," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. And the other women, reading the undeniable truth in her eyes, let out a chorus of exclamations and tears of relief. Nara hugged her baby with renewed strength, prayers answered, hope rekindled. Anya ran to her grandfather, her small moccasins barely touching the snow, propelled by a wave of relief and love. She found him kneeling, his staff beside him, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the leopards disappeared like ghosts. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing with relief and pride. Borja embraced her with the little strength he had left, feeling the warmth of his granddaughter, the living and pulsating proof that everything had been worth it. "You were brave, my little warrior," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion, kissing the top of her head. Yakutia, in its cruelty and untamed beauty, had witnessed the unwavering strength of the human spirit. The deep connection of a family that, united by adversity and love, could move mountains of ice and drive away 1,000 beasts. Hope, once a fragile, flickering flame in the icy wind, now burned brightly, warming the soul of a people who had faced the deepest darkness and emerged victorious, stronger than ever. Borja, with Anya nestled in his arms, felt the weight of victory and exhaustion. His granddaughter's embrace was a balm for his aching joints and tired soul. He held her tenderly, smelling smoke and snow in her hair, a mixture of overcome danger and youthful courage. "It's all right now, my little star," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, his eyes moist with tears. That moment, under Yakutia's vast and merciless sky, was living proof that life, even in the cruelest adversity, always found a way. Anya looked up, her eyes gleaming with tears and relief. "The horses, Grandpa, and the other leopards?" Her worry was palpable, an echo of the still latent threat. Borja smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, but conveyed a deep peace. "The 50 that pursued us are gone," and the panic they felt. The fear of the treacherous ice and falling snow spread like wildfire across the tundra, affecting the entire horde. "The spirits of Yakutia acted through us, my daughter. Fear is an even greater predator than hunger." He explained that the vast number of predators was not a cohesive army, but a collection of smaller groups, each reacting to the rapidly spreading terror. The chaos generated by Borja and Anya had broken the determination of the majority. "They won't return today, perhaps never again with such fury," Borja affirmed, his voice firm. "The memory of the treacherous ice and falling snow will remain in their instincts. They will seek prey in other lands, far from here." The resolution was clear. Cunning had prevailed, not through violence, but through knowledge of nature and animals. A victory of mind over might, of wisdom over impatience. With effort, Borja stood up, leaning on his staff. Anya, with youthful energy, helped him, offering her shoulder. Together, they began the long walk back. The low sun painted the snow with vibrant hues, a spectacle of renewed beauty. Each step was a victory, each breath a hymn to life. In the village, news of the victory spread like the wind. Lena, seeing Borja and Anya approaching, stumbled out of the tent, her face illuminated by tears of joy and relief. The women followed her, their songs transformed into cries of celebration and gratitude. Nara, with her baby, ran to embrace Anya, her eyes full of admiration and affection. The entire village gathered, a human warmth against the cold, hearts beating in unison. Borja was received as a hero, but he shook his head, pointing to Anya. "Anya, my granddaughter, she was the flame that ignited hope. Her courage saved the horses and bought us time." The hunter's humility was vast, and his admiration for Anya evident. The young woman, embarrassed but proud, felt the warmth of recognition. That night, around the bonfire, the village celebrated with renewed fervor. Not only the victory over the leopards, but the reaffirmation of their deepest values, the strength of family, the wisdom of elders, the courage of the young, and the unwavering resilience of the human spirit. The horses, safe in their warm shelters, were a living reminder of the cultural heritage Borja had protected. Yakutia remained challenging, but now the Yakut people knew that together they could face any winter, any horde. The connection between them, forged in ice and danger, was their true wealth, the promise of a prosperous future. The following morning brought a different silence, not the oppressive silence of danger, but a serene and profound stillness, like freshly fallen snow covering the world. The sun, still low, cast a golden glow over the tundra, transforming the ice into millions of sparkling diamonds. Inside the main tent, Borja slowly awoke, feeling every muscle ache, every joint protesting against the effort of the previous days. But despite the physical pain, a deep peace enveloped his spirit, a warmth that the external cold could not touch. He looked at Anya, who slept soundly beside him, her face serene and relaxed, a contrast to the tension that had accompanied her. A gentle smile formed on his lips. She was living proof that hope and courage flourished even in the harshest conditions. Borja carefully stood up, feeling the weight of age, but also the lightness of a burden that had been lifted. He approached the tent's entrance, peering outside. The horses, safe in their shelters, calmly grazed on the forage that had been provided for them, their movements soft and rhythmic. There was no sign of the leopards. The vast and merciless Yakutia had swallowed their fear and hunger, leaving only the memory of a challenge overcome. He thought of the 1,000 predators, of the threat that seemed insurmountable, and of how cunning, ancestral wisdom, and above all the unity of his people had transformed the impossible into reality. It was not brute force, but intelligence, resilience, and love that saved them. Anya awoke and, seeing her grandfather at the tent's entrance, ran to embrace him. "Grandpa, are they really gone?" Her voice was a whisper of relief and disbelief. Borja hugged her tightly. "Yes, my little star, they are gone. Yakutia has taught us a valuable lesson. Fear can be a more powerful weapon than sharp claws." He looked into his granddaughter's bright eyes, seeing in them not only the innocence of youth, but the spark of newly acquired wisdom forged in the fire of adversity. She had grown, not in stature, but in spirit. Lena approached, bringing hot tea. Her face, once marked by worry, now radiated a serene calm. "The village breathes again, Borja. You and Anya have given us more than the horses. You've given us the certainty that we are capable of facing anything, together." Nara, with the baby in her arms, nodded, her eyes moist with gratitude. The village women who had once sung songs of solace now chanted melodies of celebration and renewed hope, their hearts light and filled with contagious joy. That morning, the Yakut village was not just a cluster of tents against the cold. It was a sanctuary of resilience, a living testament to the power of human connection. Borja, the old hunter with his aching joints, had proven that true strength lies in wisdom that transcends youth, in courage that defies despair, and in the love that unites a people. The horses, the heart of the village, were safe. Yakutia, with its cruel beauty, would continue to test them, but now they knew they could face any winter, any horde. Hope, once a fragile flame, now burned like a blazing bonfire, warming the soul of a people who had faced the deepest darkness and emerged victorious, stronger and more united than ever. The future, though uncertain, was now a path to be trodden with faith and the unwavering resilience of the human spirit. The future, though uncertain, was now a path to be trodden with faith and the unwavering resilience of the human spirit. In the days that followed the ordeal, a new rhythm settled in the village. It was not a return to normalcy, but an enriched version. tinged by the memory of danger and the sweetness of victory. The air, once heavy with apprehension, now vibrated with gratitude and renewed purpose. The women, as they wove and prepared meals, exchanged meaningful glances, a silent acknowledgement of the strength discovered. The men, as they cared for the horses and repaired sleds, worked with a vigor that seemed inexhaustible. Borja, though he felt the weariness in his bones, observed everything with a serene gleam in his eyes. He sat at the entrance of his tent, his staff beside him, and watched life flourish again, more vibrant than ever, under Yakutia's vast and icy sky. The pain in his joints was a constant reminder of the battle, but also a testament to his tenacity. He was no longer just the old hunter. He was the guardian and sage who had defied the impossible. The children, once fearful, now looked at him with reverence, seeking the stories of his courage. Borja, with a gentle smile, waved to them, feeling the warmth of recognition. His greatest victory was not driving away the leopards, but igniting the flame of hope and self-confidence in the hearts of his people, especially the young. His ancestral wisdom, once valued, was now an invaluable treasure, a guide for all winters. He felt the peace of a man who had fulfilled his destiny, leaving a legacy of strength and unity. Anya, in turn, was no longer the same girl. The experience had transformed her in depth and maturity. Her eyes, once curious, now carried the spark of wisdom and silent determination. She spent hours by Borja's side, listening to his stories, absorbing every word, every gesture. He taught her about the stars, the signs of nature, and the importance of listening to the tundra. Anya, with the hunting knife at her waist, felt the weight of responsibility, but also the joy of carrying the torch of her grandfather's knowledge. The bond between them, once strong, was now unbreakable. Forged in the danger and cold of Yakutia, a bridge between generations, the village, with its horses safe and grazing, was a living symbol of resilience. The women, led by Lina and Nara, organized themselves with renewed efficiency, sharing tasks and laughter. The songs that echoed now were of gratitude and celebration. Human connection, once a necessity for survival, was now a pillar of strength and joy, a tapestry of lives intertwined by love and common purpose. They had learned that wealth was not in material possessions, but in the unity of hearts, in mutual support, and in hope against insurmountable darkness. The horses, the heritage of their ancestors, were more than animals. They were the soul of the village, and their safety was the promise of a future faced with courage and wisdom. Yakutia, with its cruel beauty, would continue to present challenges. Winter would return, the cold would bite, relentless nature would test their strength. But now, the Yakut people were different. They had looked into the abyss of annihilation and found the light of hope within themselves. Borja, Anya, Lina, Nara, each bore witness that strength did not lie in the absence of fear, but in the ability to face it with courage and unity, a legacy to perpetuate. The story of the 1,000 leopards and the old hunter with his granddaughter would be told for generations, an eternal reminder that even in the harshest winter, the human spirit could flourish, unwavering, a beacon of resilience. The village now was more than a home. It was a sanctuary of hope, a monument to the unbreakable will to live.